Today we're going to talk a little bit about decoration. Decoration can happen either when the clay is wet or after it's dried. Um, and it can be painted, it can be impressed. And today I have some different examples of ways to do decoration on your pottery the way that ancient people did it. This is a piece of old potsherd of corrugated pottery. I don't know whether you can see the decoration that is formed by actually attaching the coils. This was a piece that I did in a workshop. And the coils were pressed as you were pressing the coil down. It makes its own little indent. And then it also has an indent from something being pushed into it. Could have been a stick, it could have been a wooden tool of some sort. So that's what's called corrugated pottery. And it was probably developed because the first pots were clay that had lined a basket. And so the impression of the basket was left on the outside of the pot. Then we have clay that has been incised into. This is an old 1930s probably wedding vase from, I'm guessing, Santa Clara. And this is a really good example of clay that's been carved out. So the whole pot was polished. It's a very thick and heavy pot. And then it was carved through the polish so that the places where it was incised are matte because the polish has been carved away. Now this one is from Mata Ortiz, and I don't know whether you can see that carving design that was done before the pot was polished. So this was, while the pot was wet, was carved into and made these beautiful incised designs. And then the whole thing was polished, and somehow they got into those crevices and polished with the stone as well. Then we come to pots that have been painted. So this is another Mata Ortiz pot. It has beautiful, this is a feather design, and these were painted with a brush made from human hair. So they would take baby's hair, which is very, very fine, and make a brush out of it. And so the whole pot was polished, and then the parts that are matte were painted with slip. And I'll show you how to do that here in a second. Then we have pottery that has been painted. So this is a shard of Lucy Lewis's pottery. And this is from Acoma. So the pot itself is white clay. You can see the crack where it's cracked. The clay itself is white and slipped white and polished. And then it's painted with probably manganese and iron. And these pots are painted with a yucca brush. And also I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. This pot is also from Mata Ortiz. And it's a wonderful example of painting. All of these pigments are natural pigments. So the red is iron, the black is usually manganese, and painted again with human hair. Extremely intricate. and difficult to do with a brush like that. So this is my pot that I've been working on. And I was going to show you some of the examples of how to do some of those processes. So if you're going to carve, you're going to need something sharp to carve with, either some sort of a trimming tool or a scraping tool, maybe even a pin tool. If you have none of those at home, you can take a skewer. Let's see what to do here. My pot has been polished, so I'm going to take my trimming tool and I'm going to carve into it. I carve through the slip that I polished. Now either I can make a wide line or I can make some fine lines. Don't know if you can see that very well. Maybe there. So that is how this kind of a design is done. And then if we're going to paint, we can paint with a yucca brush. Now to make a yucca brush, we're going to take a piece of narrow leaf yucca, which you can probably find growing somewhere, if not in your own yard, in somebody else's yard. And we're going to cut a piece probably about that long. So now I'm going to cut at an angle and then cut away. So I'm making a very narrow, long brush. Okay. So that's the first step. Now, this part, what you do is you chew on it. So I'm going to put it in my mouth with my back teeth. I'm chewing on it. And I have to spit out that green stuff. So what I'm doing is getting rid of all this green stuff that's on here. So I loosen it up by chewing on it, and then I take my fingernail and pull it over the length of it. You don't want to swallow that green stuff. It'll give you what we used to call the green apple quick step. So you can see that what's happening is I'm releasing all these fibers. So you can make your brush as wide or as narrow as you want. This is a fairly wide brush. I'm going to cut it just a little bit more. So you can work on this a little bit more than I have, but this gives you the idea of how the brush, a yucca brush, is made. Now it's used really differently than we do with our brushes. So if you're going to paint, you lay it in the slip, and then you lay your brush down and then pull it. And the thinner your brush, the finer the line is that you can get. Okay, so that's how a yucca brush is used. Now, if you do the slip that you used to polish your pot, and you apply it to your polished pot, when it's fired, you will get this kind of result. Where you painted the slip, see if I can get this so you can see it. Where you painted the slip will be matte gray. Where you didn't paint anything will be shiny. Now, as far as color, this was red clay, and the same thing with the wedding vase and with this pot, red clay. And it depends on how you fire it, whether the pot is going to be red or whether it's going to be black. So if you fire and smother the whole firing with horse manure, it will cause the red to turn black. So you'll have black on black, and if you don't smother it, you'll have red on red. So if this pot had not been smothered with horse manure, it would be a red on red pot. It would be this color. So another thing that you can do, and the way that the red in this, or orange, is iron. So you would take your brush and put it into iron oxide, and then you can paint with that. So this is usually done on a white pot. So you can see how different that is from painting the way we are used to painting. Usually with a brush, we would go like this with a, to try to paint. And you can't do that with this kind of a brush. This kind of a brush, you have to let the brush actually do the work. Now the way they get their iron or manganese is from a rock. So I don't happen to have any rocks like that. Sometimes you can find them, and the only way you can tell if it's actually a rock that will bear iron or manganese into water, is to rub it on a stone and see if the iron or the red starts to come out of the rock. And you do that with water. You rub it with water. And then they usually use a binder to make sure that it sticks to the pot. And what they would use is something called Rocky Mountain bee plant or lamb's ears, and they boil it until it becomes like a black sludge, and then they let it set up. They put it in a corn husk, just the same as you would do a tamale, and they peel back the corn husk and they rub it on a rock or grinding stone, um, along with the iron-bearing rock or the manganese-bearing rock, and that forms a liquid together, and that helps the color to stay on the pot. So those are some of the ways that you can decorate your pot. You don't have to be very fancy. It's difficult to do this, and you have your choice of how you want to decorate. Either you can carve, you can imprint, you can paint, and you can do a combination of all those things.